All right, welcome to Coach's Corner, where we're going to have a chat about what's important today. Maybe just tell a few jokes. Jennifer's the resident comedian, so we're going to have her probably tell a few jokes to get us kicked off. So we'll see how that goes. So as people kind of flood in, as you come in, if you've got a question about something, post it up in the Q&A box. We do have some questions that came in prior that we'll address. So look, Emily Barn, like a barn in a house, is with us today. Wonder what she's going to ask. Michelle, Dave, we've got a few people joining us. We'll kind of see what's on everybody's mind as well. There's Terry from Canada. JT, Terry has a, if I recall correctly, a Ford and a Honda dealership up there. So, you know, they're dealing with, nobody's coming to the showroom.
Probably, well, I mean, yes, and probably they've been dealing with that for a while. CarMax and people are making it way too easy to never have to come to a showroom. So I feel you, man. I feel you.
So there's the room's getting kind of full, so we'll jump into some topics really quickly. I wanted to kick us off with this kind of, I keep pulling these cards out and talking about them, this 2 mindset piece. So this fixed and growth mindset, and then a little bit around kind of limited and abundance mindset. And I did an interview earlier today with a guy who wants to put together mastermind groups for a very specific industry. And he's struggling to get people to get in the room and kind of share their trade secrets with one another because they feel like they're competitors and they don't want to get together. And that's a limited mindset, right? So the opposite of that would be abundance mindset. And then this morning I was reading an article on Wall Street Journal. I put it on social media just a little while ago about the mass exodus from New York. And that's true of all cities. You guys have heard me say rural America is on the rise, that there's a resurgence of rural America. And I feel like people will, flee these places where people are compact together to live and work from wherever they want to live and work from. And I think there's 2 ways to look at that as a business owner. You look at it and say, oh crap, my people are not going to come back to work. They're going to leave and go live in the country. Or you can look at it and say, how do I now use that to my benefit? Because your talent pool just went from within driving distance of my office to anywhere in 3 time zones. So it's just the limited mindset of, that's the difference that we're going to have in the future. How do I look at it in an abundance mindset instead of how does it impact me immediately? So maybe that's a topic we can bounce around a little bit as well. There's a Q&A box in Zoom. Make sure you folks who are attending, click open the Q&A box, post up any questions, any thoughts, any concerns, whatever's on your mind. What are you dealing with right now? See if we can float it by some of these incredibly smart people on the call today. So I think, Jennifer, you had some questions come in that you wanted to bounce off some folks.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came in, they said, we've done everything that we could to stabilize my business. We've pivoted. We feel like we're in a good place, but what does the continuation of that pivot plan look like? So I feel like people are in this position now where they're like, all right, we've done the pivot, and now what? What do you guys think?
I'll jump in there. I was doing a workshop yesterday, and I was talking to a couple of different companies that have the same idea. Both of them are pivoting during this time. And they were both talking about, oh, well, this is what we're going to do during this time. They kept saying during this time. And my question for them was like, if you've done this due diligence and there's an opportunity that this pandemic or this point in time has illuminated for you, and you're going to go, full tilt towards that, would there ever be a reason to go back, right? Would not you run this new thing with the old thing in tandem? You have to figure that out, right? So I think it might be, into Andy's point of abundance and doing things differently, if we're gonna roll into the future with this new normal and we're going to pivot our businesses toward it. Andy, what's your quote from John Spence? You cannot drag the future into the past, right? And I think that if you I think that if you kind of wrap your mind around that, it's full of opportunity. It's full of opportunity, and an opportunity that I don't think is going to end.
I agree. I was working with the company, and the only thing they've done differently in their pivot is they've started making hand sanitizer. That's the only thing that they figure with what they're doing and pivoting might not transfer to the future. But everything they did and the changes, they looked at it from a challenge within their own business model and looked at it and said, what's the opportunity to change our business model to really deliver more to our customers and more to our employees? So I think you have to approach it from the dual mindset. And why are you looking at this thing just short term? What's the long term benefit that you can build on it?
Yeah, Jennifer. I always saw something this morning where I read a ton. So this morning I was reading through from a COVID perspective, right? So what is the kind of future of the disease and the virus look like, and when do we get it under control? And we want all the answers, right? We want May the 31st, end of May, this thing is going to happen, right? In July, this is going to happen. Well, we don't know all that stuff. We have to take the information that we can get. And one of the articles I read talked about the resurgence of COVID in the fall, late fall, early winter, and it being combined with what they're predicting is a heavy flu season as well. So when we talk about, we use hand sanitizer as a good example, right? In the very near future, let's say the next 10 years, hand sanitizer is going to be something that we all probably use for a while, because we're going to change our habits a ton in the next 24 months. So we've got this window that we've been dealing with. It looks like 6 weeks till the train's kind of here. It's probably more like 18 to 24 months of change. And when you go through that time period with habitual change, I'm not sure you get over that and go back to anything that was in the past. So that's JT's point is, if you're making a change now, it's probably going to be a change that happens for a very long period of time. The other comment I'll make is, what do you do next? And I talked about this on a webinar I did earlier today. Think about the next pain point. Now, we just made these pivots, whether it be hand sanitizer or delivering the cars because they won't come in and get them, or picking stuff up at the restaurant versus going to the restaurant. We just made these kind of short-term changes because pain happened. We need to be looking into the future and figuring out where the next pain point is. And that may not be your pain point. So it might be somebody else's pain point that you can then play in that space. So as you guys are aware, because I've talked about it on Huddle, we recently have gotten these calls from commercial real estate brokers, these holders of big pieces of commercial real estate. So a company goes in, they have an office, these are the people they pay rent to. Their concern is those companies that won't return, that they won't come in and continue to pay rent. So they're calling and saying, how do I put together a package that I can take to my tenants and work with them to make their businesses stronger, so maybe they'll return and actually pay me rent. Maybe they won't go away, right? So that's going to be a future pain point that they're going to have, the commercial real estate industry. And how might you play in that space? So you've got to really think about what's coming, who else is going to be hurting from this down the line? Where's the next pain, and how could you pivot to be in that place when the timing's right?
Right, and I think we're entering a season of constant pivoting, right? That date's going to change. If anything, the circumstances we're in are going to change. So what does that planning process look like? You should be asking yourself, how often do we need to be meeting about this? What's the agenda? What are we going to discuss when we meet with our executive team about how we're pivoting? Review what you've been doing. What needs to stop, continue, change? Looking at your meeting rhythms. What needs to change there, especially because we are virtual. We might stay virtual. Some people might come back into the office as cities start to open back up. That's going to be a constant change. And we have some tools available, on our website to help put that agenda together. That adaptive crisis checklist, the short-term SWOT, or the sweat analysis. All of these are tools that you can use in that pivot planning process. And that's what we're doing, with companies every day at Petra right now. It's helping them work through and determine what that pivot looks like for them. on a continuum. It's going to always be that way for a while.
Yeah, you guys are hosting workshops all the time. JT just had one yesterday. Go to the website, jump into a workshop, bring your team, be led by a coach through that process using the tools that we created. What other questions do we have? What do you?
Hey, guys, I got one, and I don't see a question in the box yet. I got one externally from Jeremy, and his question is pretty straightforward. Probably something a lot of people are thinking about. How can I get more customers during this time, right? And the conversation that we just had, Lynn, goes straight into that. And Jennifer said, hey, we're in habitual change, constant pivoting. Another way to say it is, I think your customers, whoever they are, this might be a moment in time where customers have never been more open to just about anything, right? Like they're not stuck in the old way of anything. Everything is new. They're all at home, at least at the moment. And even after all the governors go crazy and open everything up, a lot of people are still going to stay at home wisely. So people are spending a lot of time. You can reach them digitally online and all this stuff. But even your offering, I don't think people have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, no matter what the business is. If you can find folks who might be able to receive what you do in a different way, there's never going to be a better time for people to be open-minded about that. Jason and Jennifer, how do you feel? What do you hear out there?
I hear some of the things I hear, which are similar, or kind of a little different angle, is I'm afraid to go sell. I want to look like I'm being opportunistic. I'm afraid to market myself. And, and I've said, why? They're out there. They're waiting to hear. They need opportunity. They're looking for things. This is your perfect time to reach out to them and talk to them and have more deeper conversations with them and connect on a different level, because people do have that extra time. So I think where people are kind of pulling back and saying, I shouldn't be selling right now, I think this is the perfect time to actually lean in more and actually focus your sales and hone your message to different people.
Well, we're always pushing on folks when we help them, hey, identify your core customer, now develop brand promise. What do we always say? Go ask them. Yeah. Now is the time to go ask them and sell without selling. Jack Daly and Andy or anybody would say, hey, what do you need? What's the most important thing that we bring to you? How are we doing I'm not here to sell you anything. Let's have a conversation. We all know that's sneaky as hell, and it's going to come back to us. Those folks are going to come back and say, hey, I remember you were talking to me during a tough time, and we were collaborating, and now I want to buy this thing that you've made better. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think take it a little bit further into the how, because you guys know I love the details of the execution part, right? The how is, if you don't have a digital marketing strategy right now, you've got to get one. Like if you're just relying on in-person sales and there isn't a digital marketing funnel and a way to put people into that funnel, this is the time to get the training, get the tools in place, because this is going to be going on for a long time, this new digital platform of selling. And, there are tons of tools out there where you can take what you've worked on with brand promise and with your core customer and use those tools to start building that strategy for your new digital marketing plan.
Hey, JT, I'll share this really quickly, but it's a piece of the slide deck that we're using right now. This kind of 4Q conversation, it aligns perfectly with what you said, like go ask them, right? It's have that conversation, but doing it in a way that's not, hey, what are you selling me today? How are you doing? What's going on in your industry? How are we doing? And then this last question is a little bit of a shift. How can we be most helpful right now? So that's the one that you may be in the X business, whatever X may be, and they may say, I don't need any X right now. What I need is Y. How can I be most helpful? Well, if you could find me Y, then X, so you might be able to make that pivot just based asking a simple question. What is it you need right now? Because you may be able to actually provide that or give them a resource that can provide that through a partnership or some kind of a licensing. There's lots of ways to do that. But if you don't go ask these questions, you're not going to know what your next thing may be.
Hey, Andy, tagging on to this conversation, we had a question come in that said, do you think it's necessary to offer promotions to make the sale? So do we need to make people feel comfortable spending money right now by tacking on some sort of promotional offer to get them to buy?
You want my take on that, or you guys want to jump in?
Hey, I think that if it's strategic, then fine. If it's some kind, it's an archaic thing to say in this kind of new normal. But if it's a loss leader, right? If you can get people into your product for a while, if it's a digital product, right? I know there's at least 10 companies that got me to sign up for something for free with my credit card that I now for several months has gone by and I don't use it and I'm too lazy to go get out of it, right? So they're getting my $9.99 a month. So I got to figure that out. So in that respect, yeah, I believe that it's brilliant. Along the lines of we're doing it ourselves. We're coaches, right? So we want to get out in front of people. We want to help them. We want to be able to show, number one, we want to help. And number two, we'll also demonstrate how we can be helpful during scary, crazy times and really booming times. Now, as far as like literally putting a promotion together, if you're going to take a bath on margin on a product or something, I'm not sure that I would, that's an opinion thing. That's not something that I want to do because I don't want to devalue my product in what I would consider a temporary situation. You might do more harm than good, and it's going to be hard to get people to buy back at the regular price, or hopefully you offer the best product at whatever you do and at a premium price. So I think premium things remain premium things. And if you want to get sticky with your people and your product, that's fine. But I wouldn't go dropping the bottom out of my cost. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, and I have a company I work with that sort of did this exact thing they created a promotion, which was they're actually giving their product away for 6 months. And what they've proven though over time is when they can get a test pilot program ran, they have an 80% retention on that. Their challenge has been to get people to take the pilot program. And this has been the perfect time with what they offer to actually get people to do it. And what we've backstopped it with is that if they sell their product and then there's monitoring that goes along with it and all of that is free for the first 6 months, a lot of people want more than what they're willing. They're only just willing to get 5 units where people need much more. So they've been able to backstop with people actually buying additional units. And the benefit has been that if for every 100 that they give away for free, their costs are made up with only selling 15. So they've actually increased their sales by giving away these free units right now, with the idea that if they get an 80% adoption rate, they'll be well ahead of the curve. So I think to your point is you have to look at it and say, how does it protect? Is it strategically a good decision? Is it because you need the cash flow, or is selling it at such a low price is that actually going to put more strain on the business, more strain on your staff? So you have to look at it from a strategic standpoint of what makes sense in the short term, but also for the long-term business, long-term viability of what you're doing.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit here. Look at your core assets. So what are the things that you do and that you do really, really well? Are there components of those core assets that you can deliver in a different manner? Can you take a core asset and make that the actual promotion instead of the combination of all of those assets in one? So if the combination of all assets in one equal $1 value, and that's, as JT used the word premium, that's the premium offering. Could somebody come in and take a piece of the asset and that be the actual promotion? So I agree. Devaluing what's premium is not a good idea, in my opinion. However, looking at, can you take a piece of that? Maybe you didn't ever offer it that way in the past, but could you get somebody to move and experience a piece of what you do or a piece of what you sell? A little bit what Jason was talking about as well, so that you can get them to have a bit of the experience with your organization where they normally would not have.
We had a question come in that said, I remember making a comment about team members not wanting to come back to work yet because they're receiving more from unemployment. Any thoughts on this?
I got lots of thoughts on that one.
I do
me
too.
Me
Jennifer,
too.
maybe you should go first before before the testosterone guys start yelling at people.
I want to hear what Andy has to say.
I think you're going to say it all.
Well, first of all, it's only temporary. So that's, it's a 4-month program. It's a $600 increase for that. Is it 600 or 400? $600 increase?
600.
600 increase for a 4-month period. It's a short time frame, right? So it's a short-term question. It's a short-term issue. And I think that's part of the conversation. If you have somebody in your organization that's taking, and I'll use the word advantage, it could be the wrong word, you guys can skewer me later on it. taking advantage of a short-term situation for personal gain, that may be a trigger that that's not the right team member you want in the first place. The second one is, and I dealt with this personally with one of the companies that we work with. We call our companies members, clients members, large manufacturing business, about 500 people. Usually it's hourly. So if you take that number and break it down into an annual piece, it's about $25 an hour. I mean, it's not a small amount of money. Again, it's only for a 4-month period of time. It's not annualized, but that's what they see is $25 an hour versus I go to work, I make $18 an hour. Why would I not go to work and make 25? That's the whole piece. So the reason that they're an essential business, the reason that people show up there is a bigger reason than money. They're essential in this case to the distribution of protein or food in the chain. If they don't do that, people will not eat, period. So for them, it's the communication points of what we're doing is a calling. We have to go feed families. We have to go do this work. It's not about 18 to 25. So that you got to speak to their hearts, not necessarily to, that particular number. It's not an easy thing to overcome, and it could weed out some people that you don't need in your organization anyway.
Yeah, I real quickly, I was on the workshop yesterday. I was talking to some folks, and they have essentially they have call centers, and what they do is they do market research for whatever, primarily the ag space, but it could be anybody. And so now, of course, the call centers are not open. They have everybody working from home. Well, not everybody. There are some people who would rather receive unemployment, right? Because it really depends on the tenure. It's a lower paying gig, at least initially. And so we were kind of talking through that, and they were like, well, there's some people who they don't want to mess up their unemployment by working a little bit and getting paid, and that's screwing us up. And I said, well, guys, it sounds like, number one, would there ever be a reason for you to pull all those people back to a call center? Oh, well, yeah, because, I think that we need to be in close proximity so that we can manage all this stuff. I said, why is that? He said, well, because the people who want this job are typically a certain, kind of person, lower skilled, and you have to kind of micro. I said, well, why don't you go hire better people? They said, well, there's not better people willing to do that work. And I said, bullshit, there's about 20 million right now. So why don't we figure out how to get those people trained as quickly as possible? And you'll never have to be a slave to these kinds of employees again, right? Now I say that, I'm not generalizing everybody. I'm sure they have great people. Same way there's always going to be some bad apples. But it's not a problem in this temporary moment of having people that don't want to come back from unemployment to do work. It's a larger problem. How can you make it how can you have an endless supply of people so you can scale your business? And if there's some work that has to be done right now to make that happen, now's the time. Let's get busy and solve it, right? So that went from a constraint question for that crew yesterday right into, oh boy, this is now moving forward, playing offense, coming out of the stronger, grow as fast as we want to, unlimited resources question. And it was abundance, right? It was super cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. It came into the conversation with a limited mindset and exited with an abundance mindset. We all know on this call that if we have an A player, top 10% team member in that at that role and at that pay grade, that's kind of the definition of A player. We know that an A player will produce 3 times the amount of work of a C player. We know that, like, intuitively. But what we don't do is we don't compensate them differently. That's the point that JT is actually making, right? So if we took an A player who does 3 times the amount of work, right? We don't have to micromanage them. They do the job very well. They produce results. And if we just paid them twice as much, not 3 times as much, then you have overall a much lower labor cost in the organization. So that's a generalization, but it's a good thought process. Jennifer, how would you deal with this?
I think, first of all, if they would rather sit at home and collect unemployment, I think they've labeled themselves as a C player, right? And they put themselves, again, making a lot of assumptions. They put themselves in a bucket of, there's a large talent pool out there right now, and the competition just got a lot bigger for them to get their next opportunity when the job market opens back up and things start that way. So going back to what you said earlier, this is a purpose thing, right? We have to make it a purpose-driven a talent pool or employee pool that they want to work for you. They want to know what the calling is. So we're going into culture, right? We're getting back into what are your core purpose? What are your core values? How do we keep those alive within the organization as we're working virtually? And, you know, I think that's where we can go with this conversation next is what does that look like? We did have a question about that, which is where I was going with that is, you know, what do we need to be doing about keeping culture alive?
I think Dylan Gallant actually asked that question, didn't he, Dylan? That's awesome. The intuitive young man. Jason, you want to jump on that?
Yeah, well, it's something I've been asking a lot of my members. What are you doing to keep your core values alive? What are you doing differently? And there's it's been really widespread from, you know, a lot of people with doing Zooms, doing afternoon Zooms, doing happy hours, doing lunches on Zoom. So a lot of things that are happening virtually, but also sending, you know, getting a lot of CEOs to send notes to people and to their families, and small, you know, having food delivered, something that's meaningful to their team to make sure that they know that they're still connected. Because I think that's the biggest challenge is if you had a good culture and it was in the office, it shouldn't just die because now you're virtual. You need to still be doing those things intentionally to drive people's engagement and caring about each other and still staying together within those sort of guideposts that you have. So it is looking at things differently and going above and beyond what you were doing before, is recognizing that it might not be enough, especially from a recognition standpoint. It's harder sometimes to do those stand-up shout-outs that might occur in a regular course of a day or in a stand-up huddle that you're together, where it's sometimes easier than in this virtual environment. So you still need to find those opportunities to recognize people and recognize the team and bringing them together. And because I think it ties back into perfectly what you said, Jennifer. You know, for people that don't want to come back, it's really about what's your purpose and your culture. And it comes into it more than just the money. Because if that's driving people, that could be it's easy to say that's on them, that you have the wrong people, but I also think it's more about us and saying, what are we not doing in our business that would want people to come back immediately?
There was, and just real quick, there's a home builder that I work with, and they're essential business, right? So they've done a really good job. They've had some good years. They've been financially prepared for this and all that stuff. And now the main thing is about keeping all of their workers safe and healthy so they can keep doing this essential business so that they can move through this, minimize the effects. One thing they've done with their remote workers who meet on a huddle every day is they, instead of shouting out each other for core values, they've gone out, they've talked to their team and said, hey, bring a core value example from your home to the huddle. And like they're showing up to the huddle, like with their 5-year-old son saying, hey, I just want to give a shout out to my son, my 6-year-old son's Mac. And like Mac would be right here and say, hey, I want to give a core value shout out to Mac because he one of their core values is outwork everybody every time. And I gave Mac an assignment yesterday and he worked so hard and came back and it wasn't quite done. And he went back and worked hard. And I just wanted to tell him, great job. It was a really, really cool thing. And people were proud to show members of the family and stuff. Fun thing and a great way to reinforce core values throughout the family. Dylan, did that, maybe Dylan can reach back out to us, let us know if that answered his question or not.
I appreciate Jason saying what he said too. It's one of those things, you know, as the kind of the leader guy, right? It's one of these things that I need to come back to that more often. So I appreciate you saying that. It does start at the top, and it's something I need to personally pay more attention to. So thank you. We do have a question around, it's a little bit tactical. If an employee goes on unemployment, what do they do about health insurance? JT, didn't you get your law degree, or were you in the
No, I went very, very small amount of time in jail, but it wasn't because it wasn't studying law. It was more of learning about the law, really. So so not knowing a damn thing about that. I wonder if wow, I really don't know how that would work. I don't know if that's whether or not people if they have to pay. I don't know if they have to pay Cobra. I don't know if they have a lower amount of rate to keep
He
their.
does know. He knows. He's got it.
I don't
There
know.
you go.
Somebody
You
else
used a big
take
fancy
over
word
work on it.
called Cobra. That
Yeah.
was big fancy.
Well, I just got done watching a thing on Life and Naked and Afraid. They were talking about cobras.
Oh, they were
and
snakes
it might
out
be
there.
the same thing. I'm going to send this to Ration or Jennifer.
You know, I believe it all depends on, and I think different states are set up differently of whether you have to offer Cobra or not based on your size of your company. So I think it's a local specific HR question that you probably need to get that I know I wouldn't feel comfortable diving into. I'm a little more comfortable in Arizona, but I assume it's not an Arizona-based question. So it all depends on on the size of your company. In Arizona, it's based on the size of your company is whether you have to offer Cobra or not. So
Jennifer, she's probably the most read one of all of us. So
I don't think so. I don't know. You know, it is one of those things where we need to have good relationships with somebody who's up to date on your specific state's employment law. And you know, knowing who this question came from, I know that it's a small company, and I know that they're in New Mexico. So it's going to just depend on the policy of your state. And I'll reach out to you, friend, because I know who you are, and we'll work on this together.
all right. So
I'm young enough to actually still be on my parents, so it's not anything I need to worry about right now. But you know, when I get a little bit older, sorry, Andy, I didn't mean to cut you off.
So typically, like Cobra is going to be about this around like 20 employees or more, I think, right? So some states are going to be different from that, but you know, there are things that we can do to help support our employees if they are laid off, furloughed, et cetera, during this time. And we certainly need to be thinking about what those packages look like and putting together something specific to say, this is what your resources are before you lay them off or before you furlough them. These are your resources. Here's a packet on how to file unemployment in our state. This is what your insurance options are. You can stay on ours with Cobra, or we can move you on to something else that's specifically for people who are unemployed. And this is what, you know, your options are for potentially coming back. Like, just being really transparent with them is the key, and then being there for them to answer their questions as they're going through the process of collecting unemployment, setting up their own insurance, et cetera.
I think to that point, I think it's really important is we're thinking about it from the employee that might have just gotten let go. But I can tell you, it is equally, if not even more important, for the people that didn't get let go to see how you handle the people that you let go, because that says how you treat people, and they'll care about that. So you can it'll impact you if you just let them go and toss them to the side in a sense. Here's your severance, thank you, or here's nothing and thank you. The team that's still there is going to know that. So thinking about your team and how you treat people, just as, you know, it's important, you know, how you treat them when you're letting them in, but in this situation, it's also equally important is how you let them go. So it's really important to think about the impact it's going to have on everybody else.
yeah, this is a little bit off this exact topic, and you're right, Jennifer. Everybody, it's state specific. You need an HR employment law person to tell you the kind of details behind that. And you should get the data and then give them the data. And it shouldn't be difficult to get that. I've had a lot of conversations in the last few days about people thinking about the return, right? So, you know, what does the return look like? We laid off 50 people, we laid off 500 people. We kind of think this might be what it's going to look like. What does the return look like? And my question has always been, well, what are you communicating to those people that you laid off? And many of them are saying, well, we're not communicating to them at all. So you really have, you know, 3 buckets, A, B's, and C's, right? So we know who our A players are. We know that team that we have to have back, those key core people to the operation of our business. And if we're not communicating to them that they are key and we want them back and we feel like this is going to be the time period, we need to be doing that communication. And to Jason's point, it's a complete disservice to anyone that we know we're not going to bring back. If you have people that you have furloughed or laid off, and you know you're not going to bring them back, and you're not letting them know, hey, you need to get in the job market. You need to start looking for something else. You got to be put your big boy pants on and go have that conversation. So you got to start communicating to those people who now you've distanced yourself from. The second piece that I've been suggesting to folks is it's time to start training. So if you do have people who are laid off, who are even on unemployment, and there's no reason that you can't say the expectation is there going to be a return, would love for you to consume this knowledge so that when you return, you're returning better. So think about that. If they are sitting at home, give them something to do that's going to then benefit the organization and themselves in the organization upon return. Let's see. This is about people too. So let's go to Jason first on this one. How do you handle hiring during this time? Teaching them the way things were and adapting to what is new.
I think this is an opportunity to really look at your onboarding processes. It's time to kind of start it fresh and say, are we building the team we need to build, and are we training them? This is a great time to train and invest in that time, because how many times we say, boy, if we could just stop our business so we could build these things. Well, you're kind of doing that in a sense now. So take advantage of the time you have to actually look and say, what are we doing, and are we onboarding properly? And then looking about it and saying, am I training on the old, or are we training on the new? I think it's a real clear understanding of, you have to be clear within your own mind of where you're going as a business and training on those things. If it's something you're not doing and you've moved into the past, there's not much need to really spend time training on it. Train for the future of where your business is going, not what it was, in a sense, because things are different. And what's it look like training for the past, train for the future and where they're going. This is a great time to look at that training and understand. I mean, I work with a company in California where they're completely shut down, but all they've done is tear apart all the processes, and especially their hiring and their training processes, and dialing that in and looking at their team to say, where did we miss? So they've been kind of going back on doing talent assessments on people to understand and say, okay, where did we get these people from? The ones that were the C players, and how do we eliminate that in the future? And so they're creating a whole new hiring process and a whole new onboarding process. This is the perfect time to do that.
And that's the place those guys, that's where they're going to have to, that's the first place they're going to get hit coming back, right? Mm-hmm. So when they do reopen, the first thing is going to be a whole new series of training. Because I think I know who you're talking about. So it's a lot of retail space, right? So people have to come in and interact, right? So that's not going to be exactly the same. So when we talk about before we had this many people in each location, when we open back up, we're going to have this many people. How do we create a safe zone for that to actually happen? There's a lot of new things that are going to, and that's the first thing they need to be focused on. So that's really good.
And it ties to what we just talked about a second ago, which is communicating with teams. So they let go around 450 people, and they actually have regular communication. So what they've been doing is they've been doing standardized weekly communications to every single person that was let go, with the idea that they're going to be bringing them back. And they've been communicating with them all along the way of all the different projects that they're working on, so that they know when they come back that what they're walking into, that they're not walking back into business as usual or what was the norm that they left from. So they're already setting the expectation of, when we're able to bring you back, this is what this is going to look like. So think about it from that standpoint too. How are you informing your team? If you're making changes, how do you keep everybody up to date on where the puck is now, as opposed to where it was before?
Awesome, Jennifer.
I think too, if you are bringing on new people during this time, if you're in the position where you are hiring before the big coming, and when everybody comes back, right? If you're hiring somebody now, that is the perfect person to be writing those standard operating procedures, because they have fresh eyes. They aren't clouded by the past of what used to be. They can literally go through and say, this is how I would do it, and rewrite the SOPs for their position looking forward, and not dragging the past with them, like somebody who's been around for a while,
My only other addition to what y'all said was, and if you're going to go out and hire people, particularly this crop of people who are out there now available to be hired, and that's a great position to be in. It might even be, I don't know what each of your particular companies, I don't know what your core values are. If you're not hip to core values, it's in the book Scaling Up. Somebody like the four of us could help you with that on this call. But it might be that everybody has a new core value now, which is be agile, right? So the expectation for any new hire would be, hey, come on in, love your work history. We're going to teach you what you need to know. By the way, we're tearing our processes apart. We didn't change for 20 years, and we've changed 20 times in the last 6 weeks. And we're going to change 20 more times, and we need you to be agile. If you can do this, you can come work here. And if you can't, head on down the road, right? That'd be an important expectation to set out to people who are new and being trained on constantly updated stuff.
That's a really good point. Let's see. I work for a small company in the entertainment industry. Our focus is on team building. We're on hold until things start back to reopen. What are your thoughts on how we would approach companies that are coming out of COVID where money is tight and they are skeptical to put a group of people together? Do you need to read it again? You good?
I'll jump on that. One of the guys I was working with yesterday is in public event entertainment stuff in New Orleans, right? So going to be a while before they kind of reopen completely for business and get all their tourism going and all that stuff. So it might be, there was two questions there. As far as people being hesitant to buy what you sell or what you offer, team building specifically, yeah, I don't know what the appetite's going to be for people coming out. It might just, it's possible right now they're not aware that they have a team building issue. So the more that you can do now to kind of let them know, hey, you just had a reduction in force. You got a lot of people coming back who might still be mad. You got a lot of new people you just hired. You need to do team building. You know, that's one thing, being able to sell it. As far as people who are skeptical and getting large groups of people together, I think that's going to, here in Nashville, where a lot of our everything is built on tourism and conventions and stuff, I believe it's probably going to default to whatever the law allows, groups no bigger than 100. So maybe you want to tailor what you do for that size. And you have an offering for a group of less than 100 and an offering, and maybe go ahead and, because right now, likely people are sitting there going, man, I want to have an event. I was going to do an event for 1,000 people. I don't know what to do now. And maybe you, as the event professional, you go to people and say, well, we know what to do. Don't worry about it. Here's the offering. We do a keynote in rooms like this, and then we break them out in rooms like this, social distancing and all that stuff. That would make, I think, probably put people at ease to spend money on it.
I was also going to say, with this, I think this would be a good opportunity to look at some sort of pivot of saying, if all the team building activities were done in person, face to face, active touching, how do you create something that isn't? Because if this of the virtual world becomes a little bit more of regular in the business going future, which I believe it will be, how do you create team building opportunities using this? So it's really an opportunity for you to create something new and a new offering to people. And I think that as far as money tight, one of the things that every company should have is a rolling cash flow to understand their cash flow runway and what it looks like and pushing it out. My members I work with, I worked with them on a 13-week rolling cash flow just to make sure that they're aware of the situation of where they're going to be and what it might look like. Okay, so play some what if scenarios. If we're able to open up and we need to bring people back on, or is there an expense to bring opening up the business, whatever that might look like, what do we need so that you're building for that? You need to look and say, if there's an event that's going to occur, I need to make sure I'm able to fund that event. And so you need to have an idea of what your current expenses are and how you're managing yourself to get to that point. It's not easy to do, but this is the stuff, this is where you have to make the tough decisions right now before it happens, so that you are prepared for it.
Yeah, and I think to JT's point, you've got to control the narrative from a marketing perspective. So start priming the pump with messages for your clients to say, this is what this is going to look like when people come back, so that they know that it's an option. They're not just shutting it down. You can start talking about about culture. You can talk about team building. You can you can be the expert on this if you market it and control the content the right way as you're crawling back out of it.
Yeah, I like. I have an example of this. There's a company that I know of, and she reached out to me 2 weeks ago, who was in the team building business, who had camps where people came to the camps and they spent time in the camps. Obviously, that's gone. They've completely changed, and they're now virtual. And I think it's the limited versus abundance mindset. So when I look at this particular business, much like what JT was saying, team building is a need more now than ever before. Before, we crashed into each other at, events and in the office, and we used to go to Summit and have Petra University. We did all that stuff, right? We don't do that stuff anymore. These type of interactions between one another, the need is greater than it ever was before. I also believe that, as Jason said, this virtual world and how we're interacting virtual is not going away. I said earlier, it's 24 months. I mean, the vaccine is end of next year sometime, is what Bill Gates said, right? So, I think it's a ways out before we're going to put big groups of people into anything. And there's an opportunity for you to take advantage of that. Whereas potentially in your industry before, you could pull one of these things off every 4 days because you had to do it over here. It was $40,000 to do it. Well, hell, now you can do one, every 3 hours, and you can do them anywhere in the world, depending on time zones. So your market just exploded, and the money is tight. Yeah, the money's going to be tight, and it costs you a hell of a lot less to put them on. So I think I would suggest you look at this as what is the opportunity to just expose? This is my bucket of assets, and I'm really good at these 5 things. How do I take my bucket of assets and make it work with this new virtual world? And in a way that's less costly for the market, that gives me a broader audience, and then I could do it a hell of a lot faster than I used to do it. I think this is a really good opportunity.
I would agree. I had a question that came to me. How do you handle an individual, or maybe even a group of individuals on your leadership team, that are not buying into the pivot? They're still holding on to what you did and are not accepting the idea of the pivot for the short term, let alone the long term, or you guys save in the short term, let alone the long term.
I have an idea about that, and only because I get inspired by, y'all know me. So for the longest time, the space that I played in was peacetime CEO, right? It's been peacetime. Everybody's being prosperous. We want everybody to work together. There's also time for wartime CEO, right? So we are pivoting. We're doing this thing. Here's why it's important. Let me illuminate it for you. I need you to get behind this. And then the next conversation is, what is your problem? Why are you dragging your feet? If you don't get behind this, you're going to be jettisoned from the team. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. And that conversation happens quickly, because everything else, the whole rest of the world's happening quickly. So people, you might disagree on this call. I think it's almost like Andy Bailey's old-fashioned wonderful sticky note of, you can't change the people, change the people, right? They're going to have to get used to this idea of doing something different, or they can go do the old thing by themselves.
Yeah,
I agree. I'm not adding necessarily to that, except just to say, like, they're going to drag down, right? And then their teams are not following either. So it's not just the executive, it's that executive's team that you're also fighting that battle with, to not be able to pivot. You got to have everybody aligned. I mean, when we talk about the Rockefeller Habits Checklist, the very first thing is, the number one thing is the executive team healthy and aligned? And that's what we have to go fix if that's going to be the issue. I don't know, Andy, I know you have some thoughts on how to get that alignment.
Yeah, I think first is understanding the difference. I had a good conversation with an author yesterday. She wrote a book called Think or Sink. And I have it in my browser. She's like, here's the PDF, go to page 164. This is the conversation we're going to have. And the way she unpacked that with me was, because I was talking to her about this exact same topic, right? And she said, look, the reason that entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, the reasons that people start businesses and run businesses, because they have a different DNA. They have a different way that they think. So change is not something that they're adverse to. Most people in organizations, change is like, you're not going to change me. You're not going to change me. I don't like change. Give me, the comfort. We chase comfort. We're biologically set. When we get uncomfortable, we chase comfort. Change is uncomfortable. And that's, so recognize it first, right? So make the recognition that it is different. And then JT's point, there's a scene in Private Ryan where Tom Hanks is on the beach and there's bullets flying all over the place and they're hunkered down behind those steel X's, and the person laying on the beach next to Tom Hanks looks at him and he says, "What do we do now? What do we do now? What do we do now?" And Tom says, "We get the fuck off the beach is what we do." It's like, sometimes, as JT said, it's wartime and you just have to make a decision and you put it out there and say, this is where we're going. No, I don't want to debate it. I don't want to get consensus on it. This is where we're going and this is what we're going to go do. And until it proves that it's not going to work and we're going to do something different, this is where we're going. So get in line with it. And you've got to be okay as leaders, I think, being unpopular and being a little bit more comfortable right now, being just not the most popular one.
There's a guy that I'm privileged to work with right now, and his team, great guy. And to this point, he's been a pretty effective CEO. Maybe the only complaint that I've heard across the organization about him was that he was slow to act, slow to make decisions. Buddy, has he come alive during this? Because there's no choice. Pivoting questions, money questions, and all this stuff. He's making decisions like nobody's business. And the ratings that he just got back, and he put out a peer review 360 through the roof. Everybody is saying they love this version of him. And so to their credit, thank goodness, they're letting him know, hey, not only do we wanted to see this from you, now you've done it and we don't ever go back to that old guy. We love this version of you. So it makes him feel good. He's killing it during the crisis. He's just got to make sure he can maintain this. It's not always going to be a crisis, and that he wants to become and stay that leader. And he's a younger guy too, right? So this is just a lesson he had to learn, and good that he did.
Awesome. So we're coming right up on time. We have time for maybe one more question. Do we have something else that came in preset?
I've got one that this is probably more than 8 minutes worth of discussion, but it's from Jose, and it is, what do you see coming down the pike generally for the economy? Right. So once again, probably above my pay grade, I'm a very optimistic person. So I'm going to send this to folks who may be a little more pragmatic than I am. So what do you guys see happening economy stuff, generally speaking, 6, 12, 18 months? Jason Rush.
Big question. Might be above my pay grade. The one thing I'd say is I think it all depends on what business you're in and what that looks like. I think some industries are going to come back much quicker than others. I think some are going to lag for at least a year and a half, 2 years. And I think that's going to be the challenge. I think certain areas of hospitality are going to continue to be affected, continue to be impacted, large groups. I don't know what sporting events are going to look like. Things like that, which are part of our mainstay. I don't know what that looks like and then what the ripple effect is from that. But I think that it all depends on where you are and what's going to happen with your business. I think you just have to stay in tune with it, in touch with your industry, and in touch with your community of what that might look like.
I'm interested to hear Jennifer, because she lives in the house with somebody that probably talks about this at the dinner table and never stops talking about it. So I'm interested to hear what she says.
Yeah. So to that point, my husband's a financial planner, and he's been talking clients off the ledge with what the market's doing right now. He is really good at just having a conservative look on things. So that, just know that's the lens that I'm looking at this through. And I can go get him if you want. We can get him on. Totally throw him off, right? Anyway, he's like in the kitchen. You can probably hear me talking about him. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. We know that we will climb back out of this. The question is when. And he's thinking, and we are thinking, that the economy might take one more drop, and then we'll slowly be able to climb back out of this. thinking, I mean, and again, above my pay grade. I am not an economist. I am not a professional at this. I am just
Live with one.
right? But I do live with one. So, here's my 2 cents worth. And I'm thinking it's probably January before things are really, really rolling again. When we get through the fall flu season, when people feel comfortable and confident in the market. And that's, I think there's two stakes that you have to put in the sand. One is like sometime this summer when people are allowed back out of their houses and we're a little bit more comfortable about interacting with other humans outside of our household. And I think the second stake in the sand is 2021. And that's when we'll start to see things start coming back up. So I'll stop there before I say too much, right? Too much opinion.
I think it's everybody has this 14-day window, right? So you got phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We'll talk short term and I'll give you my long-term perspective too. So I think what this looks like, it's a lot like when you ground your kids and you ground them and you say, like Jason, you probably had this experience. 2 weeks in your room, don't come out of your room. And then they sneak out of the room and then you go, all right, so you just added 4 more days to your 2 weeks. So you got 2 weeks and 4 days. Oh, they snuck out again. All right, so now you got an extra week. I think that's what's going to happen here. We're going to be out. We're going to be in phase 1, and the numbers are going to change, and then we're going to go back into a little bit of withdrawal. I think we're going to have to learn our lesson from that. This is my opinion, solely my opinion. We're going to go to phases, and we're going to back up. We're going to go to phases, and we're going to back up, just because we're not really good at following the rules that are set out for us. It's already happening everywhere. So that's the first part. So I think the phased approach is a good one. I think it's going to take us longer to learn those lessons to get back into phased approach. Never had ground your kids, Jason?
I thought you were referring to Rhonda grounding me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. So I do get grounded a lot. So
and JT, to the question specifically, I think the recession is a real thing. I think it's going to take us through 2021 to have an economic recovery, and it could be as long as 2022 before we return out of that recession. Historically, recessions are not 3 months or 6 months returns. These things are 2 to 4 year returns. So I think that's going to be a much longer challenge in front of us than what we think. So, Jason's point around how that impacts your business or how that impacts your life in some way, that's kind of a choice. You get to choose where you play in those spaces. We kind of get a look into the future a little bit. We kind of know what it might look like. And that's a unique thing because most of the time, historically, we haven't spent a lot of time looking at that. Like we haven't sat around and said, what's it going to look like? This question about what's the economy going to be doing? When's the last time we asked that damn question, right? So we have a lot of smart people and a lot of information that we can form some opinions and make some choices so we can play better into the future. So I think it's a really good question with not a specific answer, but certainly something you can prepare for. So we're up on time. Hey, look, Jason, JT, Jennifer, all the J's are here today. Thank you very much for being a part of this. I think we have a good time just kind of chatting with each other in this regard.
I agree.
Yeah, for
If
sure.
somebody else showed up, we'd be just fine. I go back to the postcards. So I pulled a bunch of these off, and I like this one a lot. The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion. So
Absolutely.
get out there and make sure you're setting a good example and you're moving things forward. You're taking action on stuff. I see a lot of social media that's just a bunch of opinion right now, and not a whole lot of action. People you got on this screen, these are 3 very action-oriented people. So follow their lead, get out there and take some action. Thanks for being a part of Coach's Corner today.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Fun.
Bye.
Thanks.